taking those on lower incomes out of tax up to 10,000, putting the pension back linked with earnings, never done under Labour, broken by Mrs. T, have only been because we were there saying this must be done. And it's interesting, as Lisa said, I've never had a letter about the big society either in the last year. And we have had coalitions building. It's actually a coalition which has forced the changes in the NHS. It's a coalition which meant that when the welfare bill was published, there wasn't the reduction of 10% in people's housing benefit if they'd been unemployed for a year, because some have said we wouldn't vote for it. We have had already changes in housing benefit that will temper the way forward. We have a meeting next week called by me of all parties in Parliament about housing benefit in London. And people like Lisa and I and others, I hope, did not insignificant work in making sure that the EMA pot for its substitute went up from 75 million to 180 million when we shared our concern for young people. So I just want to share with you, Gavin, what seemed to me to be how we deal with together the economic, political and environmental crises, because they are three crises, and unless we deal with them all, we don't deal with any of them. I was troubled to hear so many people in the last session suggesting that the environmental crisis issues have gone off the agenda both here and outside. Building the good society for me is partly about process. It's about ending the ridiculous parliament where we sit like football fans at opposite sides of the same. I'm a football fan myself, but it's completely tribal. It's not the way modern parliaments should work. It's about ending a parliament where the other part of the building is completely full of people, either by hereditary or by appointment. If the Labour Party can't stand up now and be with us in reforming the Lords in this parliament, there is something seriously wrong with their lack of radical intention. It's about making sure that we look at legislation with pre-legislative scrutiny and draft bills, that we accept amendments, if they're good amendments, from wherever they come, including the opposition. And it's making sure absolutely that everything that's proposed by any government in the future has impact assessments beforehand, so we know exactly what the impact is, particularly on the poor and the disadvantaged. I'm not against U-turns if in the end you get to a better place by any government. And there should be less criticism of U-turns when the government is changing from a less good place to a better one. But there are things we can absolutely work together on. I just want to put these things on our shared agenda. Abroad, holding firm on making sure we implement 30 years late, it may be, but the Brandt Commission 0.7% of money of a rich country going to overseas aid, really building up our efforts on conflict prevention, making sure in future that all governments, including governments of the so-called left, respect international law and don't ignore it, making sure we deal with the arms trade, scandalously propagated by this country in the past under governments of all colours, and making sure the right to protect in international law works. There are coalitions where people out there in the most difficult circumstances rely on governments in the West to deliver. But at home, where I would say in answer to what Ed said in Wrexham this morning about there being recklessness by people like me on young people, old people, families and the NHS, there is no recklessness, because I know, as John does and Lisa does, that building a good society means decent, affordable housing for everybody, decent incomes for everybody, good jobs for everybody, and best quality public services for everybody. That's absolutely why I am in politics, and I spend my life now, as I have done for 28 years, delivering. And that means the Labour Party, as well as my party, has to continue to say we don't just believe in closing the gap between the rich and the poor, we believe in redistribution of wealth and opportunity and, yes, work. There is a ridiculous society where some people are working 50, 60, 70 and 80 hours a week. Some people have 2 and 3 and 4 homes, and some people have no jobs and no home. We really have to say things as they're found on the street and win the hearts and minds of people in changing that. We need to have fair taxation, seriously fair taxation. That means looking at new forms of taxation, going back to the old debates about taxation, taxing undeveloped land, so that there's an incentive to build on it, so that we get the housing in urban areas we need. Taxing accidental profits from development, which at the moment don't go into the pocket of anybody but the accidental profiteer. We need to be tough about salaries, not just in the public sector, having no differential bigger than 20 to 1, but why not equally in the private sector, that nobody should be paid 20 times more than the person at the bottom as a starting point, unless there is a democratic vote of every single shareholder public vote, so everybody knows how everybody votes. We need to make sure we do what John and I and others have argued for, to have a real programme for council house building. And in England, we should do what happens in Wales, which is we give local councils the right to take away the right to buy. Because if you have the right to buy, then councils often won't build. If you don't have the right to buy, then you have housing that remains available for people to rent. Let's at last have a coalition for restoring decent, affordable council housing. We need to pick up the failed activities in terms of training young people and older people to have the apprenticeships we need, to have the manufacturing industry we need to get the economy going. This government, I think, has made a very good start in understanding the benefit of apprenticeships, but there needs to be a programme that gives all who need them the opportunities to do that. And just two last things. I'm going to say one thing that's going to be controversial and provocative, but I hope you'll take it to heart. I'm about next month to have published the report I've been writing for 6 months on how we keep access to post-16 education in spite of the new fees regime. I didn't vote for the fees regime. I'm still a believer in scrapping tuition fees, but there wasn't a majority for that in Parliament. The reality is that the new scheme is a graduate tax, or pretty well a graduate tax. It's a graduate contribution. That's what Labour wanted. That's what the NUS wanted. Yes, of course, it's different in type, but it's the same basic idea. We will fail the kids on the Old Kent Road and in the East End and in Wigan if political posturing means over the next year and a half people frighten kids from going to university. And we have to tell them the truth, that it isn't upfront fees or fees when you're there, that it's payment according to your ability to pay as you earn. And I just hope that Ed and the rest of our friends in the Labour Party understand that. We've had the argument, we've had the battle, we made a real mistake of how we dealt with it. I know about that, but we're not serving anybody's advantage out there if we go on and put people off going to university. And lastly, please don't forget the green, sustainable future that people have been mentioning. Unless we get away from the madness of going down the road of nuclear power, unless we go towards the sane future of renewable energy, unless we really make sure people's homes, particularly the poor and the vulnerable, are insulated well, which does all the things we need, save lives, save bills, save emissions, and save fuel. We're consigning ourselves to a world of madness. And I hope the progressives in the Labour Party, and I heard the debate in the last session, will renounce the short-term appeal of the nuclear power option and realise that that's a very dangerous, expensive, foolish, untested road to go down. We really needn't do it. And some people like me will hold firm to the idea that nuclear is not the option, and I hope that out there we will work for the future that is a safe future in an increasingly unsafe world. I think there are plenty of radicals left in my party, in the Labour Party and others. They've been too quiet in recent years, including when Labour was in government. It's time they spoke a bit more loudly.
Thank you very much, Simon. Our final speaker needs no introduction. He's been a great friend of Compass. He's been a great champion for our politics. John Cruddas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. It's very good to be here today. This has been a classic Compass conference, actually. It's been radical, purposeful, seeking to deal with the sheer scale of change that's ricocheting around us and around the globe. Epochal shifts we're only just beginning to appreciate, understand and confront. The world tilts and demands fresh thinking and risk-taking, and I would tentatively suggest that's been on show today. The right reframes the crisis by the day, demonises the little guy, ensures the poor take the strain, and leaves the fundamental economic architecture unaltered. I think we'd all agree the last year has been very difficult. I think Simon would agree with that, actually. Labour and the left often appear listless, awash with existential fright. Where's the energy and vitality? Indeed, Compass itself has been under a lot of pressure in the last year. Many Labour tribalists are full of vitriol, blogging against us under their duvets, angry at the thought of Compass reconsidering its relationship with Labour, adamant that Labour contains all the solutions, delusional, that Labour of 29% in the polls of the gangs and the character assassinations contains all the answers. Sure it does, yeah. Like the work capability assessment, Trident renewal, attacks on Tory crime and immigration from the right, like British jobs for British workers, a stylised Middle England, one more heave, a rejection of electoral reform. Turn the dial up on the weak, kiss up, kick down. If that's the future, then Labour won't survive, nor should it. Because blaming the poor for the crisis, making sure they pay the bill, signals weakness and decay, despair and calculation, not hope and optimism. It will fail, it will deserve to. The idea that you don't move beyond Labour, that the party contains all the solutions and anything else is tantamount betrayal, at best stands as counterproductive. At worst, it's a morbid symptom of our own decline, and actually an abdication of our responsibilities to the country. Similarly, a continuous preoccupation on whether it is Ed or David who carries the flame, or Ed or Yvette, or Ed or Andy, or Ed and Eddie, surely misses the point, because Labour is not an Oxbridge PPE top trumps gig. It is the character of the party that counts, what it is for. 29 policy review groups will not answer that. Indeed, I would tentatively suggest a couple of Compass criticising bedroom bloggers won't necessarily supply the answers either. I applaud Compass members' decision to strike out and search for new ideas, to seek inspiration and political vitality outside of the confines of a parliamentary party whose culture resembles at times a Sopranos tribute band. I would suggest this change is absolutely essential. Personally, I really welcome all of the other political creeds and colours at this conference: green, liberal, blue, purple and the rest. Indeed, I would suggest that this pluralism touches on a rich theme within Labour itself. The three great romantic figures in Labour's history prior to the Second World War, Keir Hardie, Ramsay MacDonald, George Lansbury, all believed in Labour reaching out to broader social movements, parties and alliances. They were coalitionists and radicals inspired by romanticism and fellowship, all of them integral to the ILP that Simon mentioned. Later, the New Left sought solutions beyond Labour that continuously fed back and informed the regeneration of the party itself. Put simply, if people do not see what Compass is seeking to do, despite all their shrill protestations, they do not have the real interests of the Labour Party at heart. Although it has been a tough year, it is vital that we hold our nerve. Think of some of the spaces that we're trying to map out. The good society that's much in evidence today. A radical framework for human self-realisation, standing in stark contrast to an empty, desiccated materialism. A politics of virtue, not of the empty aspiration of the Blair Brown years. The objective to create wiser, more compassionate, righteous, free people, creating just institutions that will help people fulfil their potentials. A new economy, more resilient and egalitarian capitalism. Why should the poor pay the price for the crisis? A new solidarity, modern safety nets, defending our obligations to look after the weak, poor and ill. A new national identity, a modern patriotism that refuses to accept that the right can define the shape of devolved English nationhood. Throughout the history of the English left, you can detect a search to define and articulate an English radicalism beyond empire, what it is to be English and free-born, going back to Winstanley, through Ruskin and William Morris, the ILP, the radical pioneers of Labour, Hardie, Lansbury, MacDonald, the sensual Puritan Bevan, later the New Left, Kinnock, Benn, and indeed parts of early Blair, all sought a post-empire conception of modern patriotism. Why is that important? Last Saturday, there was a march of some 300 English Defence League in Dagenham, my constituency. It resulted in a brutal beating handed out to a couple of local Asian brothers who happened to be on the wrong place at the wrong time, broken boned. I haven't seen Sam Tarry here, but Sam and I sat down with them Thursday, and one of the guys has to have steel plates fitted into his cheek. Hospitalised for going to Blockbusters on a Saturday afternoon in London. Throughout the 120 years of Labour's existence,